So yeah, again, welcome to the Introduction to Google Cloud Certificate. And yeah, I'm excited to introduce the speaker of the night tonight, uh, who is Mr. Weiyuan. So Mr. Weiyuan is a Google developer expert, and he is also a senior engineering manager at Ascenda, developing teams and products under his charge. So outside of his work, he is also a key contributor in many tech communities, which he helps to run GDG Cloud in Singapore. And he also founded Big ON Development, which focuses on improving and developing the careers of others. So without further ado, I would like to invite Mr. Weiyuan for his talk. Yeah, Mr. Weiyuan,
Hey,
feel free to start. Yeah.
thanks so much for the kind introduction over here. Let me share my screen. Give me a moment. All right, you guys can see my screen. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Today I would like to share with all of you in terms of I think what's introduced earlier on about cloud certification. But I think before that, I also want to share a bit of my excitement on the cloud itself or cloud technologies in general. And of course, today I'll focus on Google Cloud and why you should learn it. And then along those lines, how to get towards that path to get certified as well. Okay, so as mentioned, my name is Weiyuan. I'm currently a senior engineering manager at Ascenda, and I'll talk about a little bit about what we're doing later on. I'm also a Google developer expert in Google Cloud, so some of you might have seen me I think, in KL and Penang last year around December, where I gave a talk on AI in Google Cloud. And yeah, mainly, this is like, both my job as well as outside role that I work with for Google Cloud. But some of you might have also seen some of the other companies I've worked at before. And I think just one small hint that I want to mention over here is that of these different companies I've worked at, all of them have one big similarity, which is that they all use cloud-based technologies. And I think that's a big part of how they let their products, put their products out there. For example, applications hosted on the cloud. Okay, and I want to talk a little bit about why these companies are on the cloud today. So, firstly, to convince you on why you should get into cloud computing, okay, and why not something like AI? AI is the rage today, right? Everyone is talking about it. Should I just go towards AI rather than something like cloud computing? And I want to give you three reasons why you should be studying about cloud computing, or at least getting some knowledge, on what cloud computing is. Reason number one. Reason number one here is that there's a high alignment for cloud computing as a topic, right, to industry trends. So I'm not sure if how many of you are aligned, or if you are aware of the history of cloud computing. Global trend is that it peaked in the early 2010s. This is where I think the initial cloud providers, when they released their initial offerings for the public to use. So, for example, for Google Cloud, they released their first serverless tool at the period of time for hosting your own web applications like App Engine. Okay, but the interesting thing is that that interest sustained even after the peak, right? It sustained across the years after that. Okay, and the main reason being that because cloud computing, right, is the backing of many different technologies that has come to fruition in recent years, and it's also used for many of the startups that you see in the local scene as well, where they use the cloud to be able to scale up their applications, build it, release it in a really quick manner. Okay, and this is not just a global trend. This is also a trend found in Malaysia as well. If you look at it, right, the trend in Malaysia for cloud computing actually mirrors that quite closely of the global trend. Okay, and if you dive in deeper into that, right, for industry trends, right, you see that at the global scale, there has been more and more companies who have shifted away from the on-premise setup. That means you set up your own server rack in your own company, you have your own aircon room for putting the servers inside. They've shifted more and more of that into the cloud environment, where you get with one click of a button, you get the infrastructure resources that you need from the cloud providers. Okay, and this is a trend that has been following on and on for the past 10 years. And looking at Malaysia, right, this trend is observed there as well. I mean, if you go and search for cloud computing Malaysia, you'll get articles like this, mentioning about different cloud providers working with the government in trying to set up their data centers, and more companies moving towards using the cloud. Okay, and in fact, if you have seen this news in CNA last year, you would have seen that the Google has actually looked towards investing a substantial amount of money into Malaysia, building their data center, getting more cloud computing resources in the country, and this is to support future use, of companies or even like what's that enthusiasts like you and I, right? Even as student developers, right, to use their cloud computing resource directly. Okay, so first reason over here, as mentioned, the alignment with industry trend. There's definitely of a lot of interest in the cloud computing, and I think it's worth your time to look into cloud computing as something to at least be aware about. Okay, the second reason over here, just now I alluded to the topics of like, why not AI, why cloud computing? And the thing is that all of the paths, towards AI leads back to cloud computing as well. If you want to do more on the side of AI, whether it's you want to be that machine learning engineer, or if you just want to be an application developer, they just use the AI models, right? It would eventually lead you back towards the cloud providers, who will provide for the resources that would get you to, use these different AI technologies. And I'll explain why. Okay, so going back to the article from earlier on, right? If you go to the later paragraph, they actually talked about how this investment in the data center at least supports, more of the AI advancement within the country itself. Okay, so this is a very clear indication that the cloud providers do provide that boost towards, technologies like AI. Okay, and if you look at the cloud provider itself, right, there's two main areas that I'll say how it advances this, fields like AI. For example, one big thing is that it provides managed tools that you can use for AI. For example, using Vertex AI Studio, that allows you to interact with models that they provide, like Gemini. Most of you might have heard about Gemini before. Okay, and you can call the API to be able to pass some sort of prompt to get some result from this Gemini model. Okay, and the application itself, countless applications. For example, if you want to use it in retail, or if you want to use it in healthcare or financial services, there are many examples of companies, right, who just use these managed tools by Google Cloud to integrate AI into their products. Okay, so you don't have to go to the extent of training your own models to be able to create it or integrate it as part of your product. Okay, you can use this managed products or tools on Google Cloud, making use of their models and their technologies, right, to take care of most of the what you need to create as part of your product. Okay, so you sort of just leverage off what they have. But if you want to go a lot deeper, you want to be able to train your own models, you want to have control of type of content that goes towards your users. That's okay as well. You can also go towards managed infrastructure from the cloud provider, because you don't really want to get like a bunch of your server racks and do the training yourself, where you have to do that training in your server racks. You have to do a lot of that heavy lifting initially by yourself. But it's so much easier to just go to a cloud provider, press a button, and get a bunch of TPUs at your fingertips. Okay, and you're still doing the initial early step for, let's say, like training your own models. It's just that you are taking out the physical work, for example, for setting up that physical servers. Okay, and it's also cost effective, I might put it, because let's say if you set up like all these different servers or machines with GPUs, you may not end up using it for 24 hours, 24/7 most of the time. So by using a cloud provider, right, there'll be lull periods where maybe you don't need these resources. So you can actually also turn them off, yeah, if you don't need them. Okay, thus allowing you like some level of cost efficiency. So giving you much more control, on the side of efficiency on how you use infrastructure, as well as allowing you to control more of the cost. So much more benefits on the end, if you're using a cloud provider. Okay, so this is the second reason, why you should learn cloud computing, because it does back, upcoming technology, or things that are more trendy, like for example like AI. Okay, and the third reason I have for you is that, like it or not, cloud computing is going to be a big part of our everyday lives. In fact, most of the things you're using, right, very likely you have already connected to some Google Cloud server somewhere as part of the products you're using in your everyday life. Okay, and I like to emphasize that, let's say as an engineer, as a data scientist, different part of your careers, right, you will definitely be touching a lot of these cloud tools, right, as I alluded just now, in my career for the different roles that I've been in. But even as a student, right, it's very likely that maybe you join some hackathon, you have the organizers issuing you like credits for the hackathon in using the cloud providers resources, so they can build something really quickly. And even for myself, right, let's say out of a hackathon in everyday life, for myself, when I set up my first personal site for other people to look at, it's sort of your own portfolio, right? essentially I actually use App Engine in Google Cloud to share it as a web application, for people to visit my site. Okay, so you can definitely use something like that as well. Use a serverless tool in Google Cloud today to create your own personal site to share your own personal portfolio. Okay, and if you look at the entirety of Google Cloud today, right, the strength in the cloud provider is not just hosting. I talk a lot about, like, using their resources to do training on models, to host your own web application, but they actually do a lot more than that. Like, and this is just a small part of the graph, they actually share, of the services they provide. Like, for example, you can actually see they provide, different services, different managed tools that helps in things like IoT, gaming, healthcare, and of course, like, the very raw stuff if you need as well, like, for example, database. You don't have to deploy your own database on your own virtual machines in compute engine and maintain it yourself, but you can actually just get, let's say, a Postgres or MySQL instance, and they will help you do things like the maintenance of a database, do all the heavy lifting for you without you having to lift a single finger in helping to maintain this service. You just need to be concerned about how you use this tool, how you use this database. Okay, the main theme I want to drive over here is in learning cloud computing. You don't have to worry about reinventing the wheel. You don't have to worry about me setting up a physical server, right? Me learning how to use Postgres or MySQL, or learning how to maintain it, getting a DevOps person to do it. But all of this is done for you. And it's done for you by the cloud provider who leverage off the economies of scale. They're doing it for everyone. So for them, they can also charge it at a much more cheaper rate for you as well. Okay. And allowing them to do this, right, where you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you can now spend more time creating value for your users, creating good applications, uh, driving new value for your users to derive from. And this is where we see a lot of startups in the last 10 years, right, how they use the cloud to build their applications. Okay, and to drive the example in, right, I want to give you an example of a case study of a something that I've built for one of the professors I worked with over the years in creating this conference submission tool. So for some of you, like for you in school right now, right, you know that your professors will have to submit papers, from time to time for conferences. So we were toying with this idea of, can we create an application and host it on Google Cloud, where we allow people to submit their papers for particular conferences. Okay, so that essentially is the problem statement. And we also wanted it to be a cheap and easy way to set up this conference tool. Okay, what we have was that we had this open source code for running a web server. So we just went to GitHub. We found like someone already created a code for doing conference paper submissions. Okay, and we identified that we needed some things, which were the hosting environment. So we need to figure out where we can host this tool, this web application, I mean. And also we need some sort of database. Like, we can't just take people's papers and hard code it, in code, right? We need to, whenever they interact with the web application, that information, that paper, as well as the user data, right, linked to this paper, needs to be saved in some database somewhere. Okay. Last but not least, we identified that we wanted to containerize the application. If you're not familiar with what the term containerize mean, right, just think of it as, you have your application code. We're thinking about how we can sort of like box it up, in an image, right, sort of like a boot image, right, that we can use and deploy anywhere in any machine. Okay. So this was something optional we wanted to do so that in case we didn't want to continue with, let's say, like hosting it inside this cloud provider, and we want to move it back to school on-prem resources, we could do that very easily. Okay, so to illustrate how you can use Google Cloud to solve for this problem, I would like to propose this architecture diagram first. Okay, so you have some sort of web application interacting with a database, and you have users with web browsers where they will use their web browser to access the web application and submit the paper via the web application. Okay, so let's start thinking about how can we replace part of this items inside this architecture diagram, right? Add the infrastructure in from the cloud provider, from Google Cloud, okay, to make it work for this application. So let's start first with the web application. What tools can we use from Google Cloud to do hosting? Okay, there are many options that you can use to do hosting in Google Cloud. Okay, the main things that you have to ask yourself is perhaps the trade-offs that you want to balance, or what you want to get out of this hosting solution. Two main choices over here for hosting. You should either go for serverless or infrastructure as a service. Serverless, the general benefit over there is that it's very easy to configure. Okay, very easy to scale, very easy to maintain. When I say easy to scale, right, usually it just means like putting like some integer let's say, like, I need X amount of CPU, or I need X amount of memory. Okay, it's just putting in a number and then clicking a button. They will just deploy a new instance with that resource. Okay, and essentially that works out entirely like when you just deploy the application like that. But the problem is that because it's so easy to configure, the configuration is also very simplistic. So time to time, you might find it really hard to customize it. If you want it to do something really specific, you might actually see that serverless doesn't really have the solution for that. And that's where you might want to look towards infrastructure as a service, IaaS, okay, where you are able to do much more deeper customizations over here, okay, and you're able to do a lot of things because it's essentially just giving you a virtual machine, that's sort of like your computer, and you can install anything inside. You can do anything you want via that virtual machine, okay. But of course, the trade-off over there is that because you are taking a lot of the maintenance responsibility, right, from the cloud provider, you end up having to do a lot of deeper configurations and doing a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. Okay, so you have to figure out in terms of hosting solution which one might work out for you. Serverless, like for most hackathons, I would actually suggest just go serverless, go for the simplistic hosting solution, get the web application solution out first. But if you need something more specific later on, you can actually change your application towards using infrastructure as a service, and then add the additional customizations that you want. In our case, because it was just a simple web application, we decided to go with serverless. Okay, so with serverless, the solution that we went for was Cloud Run. Okay, so I'll definitely recommend this if you want to, like I said, if you're going for some hackathon, or if you're building your own web application, your own personal portfolio site, you can definitely use something like Cloud Run to run your own this web application. Okay, the interesting thing is using Cloud Run, right? We have to still find some way to provide the code to Cloud Run. Okay, so how we use it is that we have to provide that containerization approach that I mentioned earlier on. Okay, that containerization approach, right, essentially is what we call Docker images. Okay, again, think of it like a boot image. Like, you when you take your thumb drive, there's like some Windows boot image or whatever. Like, you plug it into your CPU, and then you load that what's that OS up from there. Okay, so it's sort of like that. You're loading some sort of application into that server instance over here. Okay, and in order to load that Docker image in, we need to find some place to store the Docker image. It's a bit like your code you store in your GitHub repository, right? So in order to pull the code, in order for your teammates to pull the code from a GitHub repository, first you need to push the code there. So in the same way, we need to find a place to push the image into an image repository somewhere, so that our Cloud Run solution can pull that image. Okay, so from that, we're going to use image registry from Google Cloud. So in this case, the tool itself is called Artifact Registry. Okay, and once we solve for that, we're able to pull the image from our Artifact Registry and deploy it to Cloud Run, right? Next thing we want to think about is security. Okay, are we able to ensure that only our Cloud Run over here can pull the image from image registry? Because remember, this image that we built over here, right, contains code that may be secret to your team, or maybe secret to your organization, your company you're working for. Okay, so you want to make sure that you secure that image such that only this Cloud Run is able to pull it. Okay, so you might want to set some permissions in using another tool called Cloud IAM. Okay, so using Cloud IAM, you can apply concepts like the concept of least privilege. Okay, so that you can ensure that only, let's say, this machine is able to pull that image from your artifact registry inside your Google account. Okay, and maybe only yourself can push into this image registry. No one in the public domain, they can just randomly go to your artifact registry and pull your code through the Docker image, right, from this image registry. Okay, what else can we add inside this application to make it more complete? What else is missing? Well, one thing you might also be thinking about is secrets or environment variables. When you're developing a web application, sometimes you need to put some sort of API key in there. Okay, and definitely you don't want to put it inside your code. You don't want to put it inside your Docker image as part of that. You want to separate that secret, manage that secret in a separate location as well. Okay, and in Google Cloud, they do provide that tool for doing that, which is Secret Manager. Okay, so you can see over here, Secret Manager. When you run Secret Manager, you can put your secrets in there, maintain it as multiple versions, and then link it to your serverless cloud application over here. Okay, so they'll pull the right version in a secure manner, and then no one else will be able to have access to these secrets. Only your Cloud Run application, through IAM would have access to your secrets over here. Okay, last but not least, we mentioned about the need for a database, right? Because we need a place to store the information for the papers that are being submitted in. Okay, so let's just very simply use the main managed database solution in Google Cloud, which is Cloud SQL. It provides for relational databases like Postgres, MySQL, that you can use them based on your own choice. Like in this case, I believe we use MySQL as part of this application requirements. Okay, and once we're done, we essentially have created the application really quickly, running in Cloud Run itself. And then this is the one you see on the right over here is the web application running. Okay, I know it doesn't look that nice. It was an open source project that we took. So the web application itself was just meant to be a very simple one for taking in, allowing people to submit papers. Okay, but you can see that the moment we deploy this application, we got the web application running immediately. People can log in and submit their papers directly from there. Okay, but the important part here is not really us being able to succeed in doing this. I think it's very easy to get the web applications out, but the true complexity here is understanding, how hard was it to get this up. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about the time it took to take this web application up. From the time when my professor told me, hey, we need to get this web app up. Again, I didn't write the code. This was an open source project outside. Us testing it took 3 hours. Containerizing it took around 4 hours, and then fixing some bugs here and there, it took around like 1 to 2 hours. Okay, but all of this, right, pale when you compare to the time it took to deploy the cloud. It took just 3 hours for us to look at, okay, we need to use Cloud Run, we need to use like the database tool, we need to use Secret Manager here and there. Okay, and all of this, right, why it took such a short time to deploy to Google Cloud was because most of this just require a click of a button, right, for you to start using those tools. Okay, and hence it was so easy for us to get this code immediately pushed up in Google Cloud and hosted, almost within that, like a single day itself, within just 3 hours. Okay, so it's very, very fast to get things done using Google Cloud. And let's say if I were to compare this to doing it on an on-prem server, for example, you can start from a very laborious affair of like getting, ordering a server machine from some company, and then maybe you wait for a week for that server machine to come, server rack to come, and then after that you have to install your software in there, and then you have to figure out how to set up the static IP going to that machine, and blah blah blah. All this can take a really long time. Okay, but by relying on the cloud, you've essentially reduced that time frame to get the application up, right? In a matter of minutes, if not hours. Okay, and besides the cost of time, right? I also want to talk about the actual cost, like the monetary cost itself. For us, right, running this, right, in one single month itself, it was just 18 USD. Okay, and again, right, if we go down the path of taking your own physical servers, you have to prepare the aircon room as well. Maybe you even need to get things like a security guard to guard the server room. I mean, I know maybe it sounds a little bit funny. You have to get a security guard, but you actually have to do it. Like in the cloud data center, right, they actually have this like 7 layers of security where it starts from like the perimeter, the fence perimeter, the security guard, and all that. And those are like production grade physical to software level security. Okay, and those are things that you may not be able to provide by running your own server room. Okay, and they're able to do that at that low cost of 18 USD. And definitely we can't do that ourselves if we run everything physically. Okay, so it's definitely a lot more cheap to also use the cloud to run your applications there. Okay, so this is essentially, yeah, the entire case study over here, and I hope it illustrates this point really well on not reinventing the wheel, spending more time to build value for your users. Because as you see earlier on during that time, right, I spend more time on the application rather than figuring out the hosting needs. Okay, and because of that, right, you're able to leverage on being able to do things in a much more cheaper way, as well as being able to very quickly host your application on the cloud, okay, by leveraging on the cloud to get these two big benefits. Okay, and hopefully I've convinced you, with this case study as well as the earlier reasons why you should focus on cloud computing. I mean, it's a good complement to up and coming technologies like AI, and being able to put yourself out there in the center stage, as you enter in the industry in the future. Okay, the next part, I want to talk more about certification. If you're convinced that cloud computing is great, the next step is how do I prepare myself to be, in a good state. If I'm going for an internship, or if I go for in the future a full time with a company, work for different companies. Okay, and cloud certifications are definitely going to get you there. as I've seen in many different certifications out in the market, right? Usually is the cloud certifications, like for example, Google Cloud is cloud provider, or the other cloud providers, or even those by the Linux Foundation for Kubernetes certification. Usually those certifications hold a lot more weight, with the different companies who look at your resume, and usually they're looking for certifications like that. Okay, so if you're looking at the Google Cloud certification and trying to decide what certificates you should go for, generally I would say first break it down into three sections. First, you have the foundational certification, associate certification, and professional certification. Now, if you are a beginner, right, of course, please don't go towards the professional certification first. I would recommend that more for if you have like a few years of using Google Cloud. Okay, then you should probably target some of these certifications. Okay, if you are new to Google Cloud, foundational certificates like digital leader, right, is probably something you might want to go for. Okay, but if you have already maybe like 1 year of using Google Cloud, 1 to 2 years of using Google Cloud, I might actually recommend that you go for the associate cloud engineer instead. Okay, because these are generally I would consider them as like easy entry level certificates that you can go for. Okay, and a digital leader cert, right, is actually not just for tech professionals. It's also for let's say like your other stakeholders who may not be like entirely in tech, like may not be engineers, software engineers or engineering managers. Okay, they could be, let's say, like your business personnel, your sales personnel, who just want to understand how you're using the cloud. Okay, so this is digital leader is actually something that's also recommended, for the non-tech personnel. Okay, of course, tech personnel can also take it as well. There's a healthy amount of technical knowledge being tested as part of this certification. Okay, and going towards myself, I have had the opportunity of taking each of the certificates in these three areas. In the associate area, I've taken the associate cloud engineer many years ago. Of course, as you can see from the date itself, it's already expired. I do have two more certifications that I've taken over the last 2 years, which are still valid. So you have the digital leader one that I took in 2022, so it's expiring the end of this year, and also a professional cloud architect. So this is the most advanced tier. And yeah, this is actually expiring soon, so I have like around 1 month to look at retaking this. Yeah, but the point over here I'm trying to share is that because I've went through this certification exam multiple times, I want to share a few tips with you to that you can take in terms of when you're taking this exam later on, right? You know what you should look out for. Okay, so there are 4 tips that I want to share with you. Okay, tip number one, it's a tip, but it's not so much of a actual thing, lah. Actual tip, lah. It's more so to just prep your mentality first. Okay, which is that one thing that I realized, right, when I was preparing for the certification exams, like for example the digital leader one, is that I usually when I go online I try and search for papers, and I see a lot of comments of people mentioning they spend like 6 months, 1 year before they actually go for the certification exam. And the thing is that it's actually not as hard as what most people say it is. Okay. The thing is, firstly, if you look at the exam, right, most of the questions are either MCQ or multi-select questions. You don't have to write the essay. Okay. So in the worst case scenario, if you don't really know the answer, you can actually just tikam, which is just randomly select the answer. Okay. But the point of what I'm trying to mention over here is that as long as you prepare sufficiently, you don't have to wait for that really long time before going for the exam. Okay, as long as you feel you are prepared for it, you should go for the exam. Okay, and that brings us to the next tip, which is a question that you have in your mind right now. Okay, which will be, how do I know if I'm ready to take this exam? Okay, and my general answer over here would be that of all the practice papers that you do, right, of course you'll be doing a few practice papers first, and then you might end up not doing so well there. You'll be studying the course syllabus again. You're reading a documentation or going through like some course somewhere, Coursera for example, which has like certain courses for certain exams. Okay, and then you will try out other papers again, and eventually you will reach a point where you're able to answer maybe 90% of the questions successfully without having any issues, and most of it being correct. Okay, and when you reach that stage, I would generally say you're ready to go for the exam ready. Okay, but I don't want to just hang you there and just give you like this very vague tip that whether you'll be there or not. In fact, along with this second tip, I also want to share with you materials you can use to help you prepare for this exam. So of course you can go for resources like Coursera. Why I recommend Coursera is because there is an official Google Cloud account there For example, you have this one for the Cloud Data Engineer Professional Certificate. Okay, so you can actually use Coursera, right? Not just for this, of course, like they have different courses there, and you can use this official account, the courses that they want you to subscribe, right? As a direct source of information you can use to learn more about Google Cloud and preparing yourself adequately for this exam. Okay, besides Coursera, of course, you can also use the other official resources like the what's the FAQ page of the certification exam. So again, I'm using a data engineer FAQ page, but there should be similar FAQ page for different certification. And there will be usually sample questions over there as well. Okay, so this one is a link to a Google Forms, right, where they actually show you the answers. Okay, not answers, right? The MCQ questions that you have to do as part of preparing for this exam. Okay, sort of to evaluate whether you are ready or not. Okay, so some of these different certifications should have those sample questions there as well. And one thing that I'll definitely recommend you to do, right, is to explore this tool called Cloud Skills Boost. Okay, some of you might have already used it. It's also called Quick Labs. Okay, and you use it to do labs and quests. Okay, and this gives you access, to a student account. So when you start any of the quests or labs, right, they'll usually give you this student account that you will log in, and then you will access Google Cloud directly. Okay, and from that Google Cloud account, like this is actual Google Cloud, you'll perform a few tasks as mentioned to you, what you have to do in the lesson plan in this Cloud Skills Boost quest and lab. Okay, so as you run through that lesson plan, right, and doing the steps on Google Cloud, you actually get real, hard, dirty experience in terms of how you can use Google Cloud. Okay, hands-on experience over here. Okay, so this is really good because it gives you that opportunity, not just learning it theoretically, but actually learning how to do it for real in the cloud environment as well. Okay, besides the official resources, I do have some personal tips I want to share for unofficial resources as well. And I know it's being recorded over here, so I just want to say this is not, like I said, it's not official. I don't generally over recommend this as the only way of doing it. Please go for the main official ones first before you go for the unofficial ones if you run out of things to learn from. Okay, so the thing is that it's a bit of like a black market situation there, where sometimes if you go to YouTube, right, you actually find that some people will share their experiences of the previous exams that they did before. Okay, and then they will share with you, okay, these are the questions I've done there. This is maybe the answers that we think is the right answer here. Okay, just to be clear here, Google has not released any answer key for any of the exams they've done before. Okay, so any of these videos you see over there, right, you should take the answers that they tell you with a pinch of salt. Of course, do check the documentation to make sure that the answers they say should be accurate. Okay, and don't just blindly trust it. And also the second thing over here is that I would say don't just go and memorize the answer. Make sure you understand why they think the answer is correct as well. Okay, don't use it as a way to spot the questions, but use it as a way to find the relevant questions that could come up and use that as a way to train yourself towards getting to that ready state before you take the exam. Okay, another thing I also want to share is that as I'm sharing with you these different materials that you can use to prep for your certification, right, before you go for the exam, right? I mean, some of these resources like Coursera and Cloud Skills Boost, you actually need to pay money for it. Okay, so what if you can get free access, towards some of these resources as well? So time to time, the cloud environment, the Google Cloud, will run campaigns where they will try to encourage you to learn more about Google Cloud, and you can actually take advantage of that to get free access to some of these resources. Like, for example, in the middle over here, you can see that previously they ran this campaign, but allowing everyone to have free 1 month access to the professional certificates on Coursera. Okay, so those campaigns can come in time to time. Okay, you can also see on the left over here, Cloud Skills Boost. They will run campaigns, every other week, every other month, right, to allow you to participate, in some sort of like contents or competition. Okay, and as part of that, you can actually get some credits for using that in your learning experiences, for other labs that you're trying out as well. And I've also listed down some of these tips inside one of my blog posts. So again, if you're interested, you can go and find my blog post. Later on, I'll link this entire slide. So if you want to find it, you can go from there as well. Okay, let's go into the third tip. So tip number 2, right? We talk about how we can get the most relevant information and put it into our head. So that's more like input. Tip number 3, right? I want to focus on output. Okay, so starting is just half the battle. You need to also know about how you can maximize your output. Okay, so strategize how you take the exam. Most of you, you're still in school, right? When you go for your exams, right, there's always like a certain strategy you'll go for, right? Maybe you'll put your lucky pencil or lucky pen over there, and then you'll take like, maybe like there's a bunch of, maybe if you're allowed to bring like what's that, the help sheet, right? Where you can write a bunch of tips for those particular exams, right? You strategize how you're going to write those things as well. In the same way, it's the same thing for this exam that you take for Google Cloud. Okay, you should strategize for how you take the exam by understanding how the exam works. Okay, and let's talk about how the exam works. So, firstly, if you look at the format, right, the format for most of these exams is usually around 50 to 60 MCQ and multi-select questions. Okay, so like I said, no essay questions. It's just asking you to do MCQ questions. Okay, so we know usually it's around 50 to 60 questions. Okay, and usually you are given a budget of around 2 hours to complete. And just one thing to note is that there could be some case studies in there. Okay, what are case studies? Case studies here, usually what it means is that they will give you like a passage you have to read, like sort of a scenario of a certain company trying to do something. And then they will ask you maybe like around like 2 to 10 questions based on this scenario. Okay, and you have to try and answer it to the best of your abilities. Okay, it will still be MCQ questions, not essay questions. Okay, so the strategy I'll suggest for you here is spend 1 minute per question, like in the initial run of all of these questions. So let's say you have 60 questions, right? It should just take you up to 1 hour to just finish it for first round. Okay, and you might be asking, what if I get stuck at a question if I don't understand it? If you get stuck at it, right, don't spend more than 1 minute there. Just go on to the next question. Okay, you will have time later on to come back to the question to revisit it again. But don't leave the other questions on the chopping block. Get the rest of the questions answered first. Okay, and once you've answered all the questions, right, you should have some time to come back to the earlier questions later on, to be able to revisit it and try and see if you can, better answer it. Okay, and if you do it in this strategy, right, you essentially should have around 1 hour left to do that check. Okay, so usually what I'll do is I'll perform another 1 or 2 more rounds of checking for all of the multiple choice question answers, right, just to make sure, am I confident in both the questions that I'm confident at, right? Am I confident that the answer I gave is correct? Am I confident in those that I don't really know, right? Just give the most best educated guess, perhaps. Okay. And one thing I just want to say is that, if when you're looking at those questions, right, sometimes you'll look at the options and you will think, wow, two of these answers sound very, like, both sound correct. So just choose the most correct one if you are only allowed, one single choice. Okay. Those situations do happen. And I believe they do try to give like this type of like tricky questions, because they want you to also choose the most correct answer as well. Okay, and another thing that you should understand, besides the exam format, right, is also the environment. Because there's two options for you to choose when you're taking this exam. Either you do it on site or you do it remotely, that means in the comfort of perhaps your study room or bedroom. Okay, and if you're doing it on site, which I've done so on one occasion, just make sure you bring a jacket. So in my case, I regretted it because I didn't bring a jacket, so I it was very cold. The exam room itself was very cool. It's like a computer lab, and I had to sit there for like 2 hours, and you couldn't even uh, take a break and go and buy a jacket or whatever. So essentially, yeah, just make sure you adequately prepare for the environment. In this case, for on-site. If you're doing it remotely, right, make sure you also set up your machine properly. Like, don't just 15 minutes before the exam, then you go and check whether the your machine is prepared or not, and then you end up having to panic and download a bunch of tools just to make sure that your machine is okay. Okay, do it early if you can. And another tip is that you also have to make sure that your environment itself is clear of like any, like, for example, if you're doing the remote proctored portion over here, right, you actually have to turn on the camera and let the invigilator see your environment around you. So, for example, like, let's say you can see my background, right? I have those things over there, right? You have to take those off as well. You're not supposed to have those over there. Okay, and also your table itself must be clear. I think they allow you to have like one glass of water, but the glass itself also must be like transparent, like you cannot take like a ceramic mug. Yeah, so there's some rules and regulations that you have to follow, like, and make sure you read up those beforehand and prepare your environment adequately. Optimize your environment before you go for the exam. Okay, final tip. My last tip for you is, I think one thing that I see for some of my friends, right, is that they book the exam really early, Let's say they book it for half a year later from now, thinking that it will take, let's say, half a year to study for it. But when they're reaching closer to the date, they regret it and they want to shift it, but realizing that they cannot shift it or they're not allowed to shift it. Okay. So my tip for you over here is, if you know whether you are thinking about doing this exam at a certain date or not, don't book it yet. Like, especially if it's 6 months in advance. Maybe 1 month in advance is still fine, but don't do it too early in advance. Okay. Do it, let's say, when you are 1 month away from the exam, right? You feel you're quite ready already, right? Then book the exam. Because the problem being that, yeah, once you book it, rescheduling may not be a guarantee, and you're using actual money to pay for this. So, or if you're getting a voucher, right, to redeem to go for it, right, you may not be allowed to reschedule after that. So this might end up wasting that voucher, and then you end up not taking an exam as well. Okay, so book it only when you're ready. Okay, besides the primary four tips, right? I just want to give a few extra tips. Not really pertaining to the exam, or some of it maybe yes, but it's more funny tips if anything lah. But could be helpful as well. So yeah, I just want to mention. Sometimes you can get free Google Cloud vouchers as well for taking these exams. Okay, so you can join programs like the Google Cloud Champion Innovators, or even participating in Google Cloud Next. I mean, even just viewing it. Sometimes they might run like certain campaigns where they will actually offer you that coupon code for using for the exam. Okay, so and just to be upfront, right? Just now the certs, the exams that you saw that I take, right? At least one of them is actually using a voucher coupon, right? That I got from these programs over here. Another tip that I have for you is more towards, if you don't know what's the answer, how should you best guess to get the answer, to get the right answer? Okay, so if you're not sure about the answer and you have four options, right? My recommendation is go for the smartest answer. And when I say smartest, right, go for the one that sounds the most intelligent. Like, if they're telling you, okay, let's say they want you to do XXX task, okay, and they're telling you the first option is, maybe first option you can choose is manually do blah 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 and then do this, or another option could be automatically do this by enabling this option. Okay, you might want to choose the more automated one, because if you think about it, right, in the end, Google Cloud itself, I mean, it's a company lah, and they wouldn't want to, via the exams, right? They wouldn't want to sort of run themselves down by essentially giving the right answer as the less intelligent option, or the more manual option, the one that doesn't sound as good. They of course want to put themselves in the best light as much as possible. And I've seen like a lot of these questions, right? Usually, like for myself, right, I would feel that the correct answer, if I know the topic itself, it's always the more intelligent one. Yeah. So that's my suggestion towards, if you are guessing, if you're not sure, right, go for the smartest answer always. Okay. And with this, I hope that you feel ready, in terms of what you need in prepping for the exam. Or if you have already prepped for it, I hope this has helped you, somewhat towards getting yourself, in the ready state for booking the exam and going for the exam. Okay, yeah. So that's almost the last slide, really. Like, this one is just to share, I'm part of this company called Ascenda. If you're ever interested in looking out for internships or applying for jobs in the future when you graduate, you can look out for us. And yeah, that's the end of my sharing over here. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn over here. So thank you so much for your attention, in this sharing.
Thank you, Mr. Weiyuan, for such an insightful talk about especially the importance of cloud computing and why we should get started with the cloud certification. Actually, I myself started with the foundational level, and actually I went through the training, sorry, the training course on the Google official site, and actually I'm currently working on a past year paper, but I noticed that I haven't really outputted what I gained through that course, so I'm planning to do that with the cloud skill boost that you mentioned using the labs. So yeah, thanks so much for the helpful tips. And yeah, is it okay if you could stop your screen sharing a bit? Yeah,
Good thing.
thank you. Yeah, so we would actually like to move on to a Q&A session. So if you guys have any question, please comment it in the comment section. Or we are also, if you want to just speak out loud, that's fine as well. You can just unmute your mic. So we'll just wait for a bit and see if there are any questions. I'll wait for a bit more and see if you guys have any questions. Okay, yeah, actually, I do have one question. So when it comes to certificate, how much do employers do actually look into those certificate? Let's say if you have one.
Okay, so as someone who is also hiring myself, uh, I'm gonna say okay, I wouldn't put that at the most topmost priority unless if there isn't any other like what do you call it larger accolades to look at. So for example, let's say currently you guys are still studying, right? And let's say later on you graduate, you're looking for a job. I would say the first thing I'll still look at is your degree lah. But if I'm comparing between two equivalent person, right, competing for the same job itself, and they have the same qualifications, then of course things like the certification does help. It does add that additional boost up in terms of your knowledge. And of course, if my company is using Google Cloud, I think having that cloud certification adds also the additional context that this person actually really knows about it, like he or she has already done that certification before. I think the same goes for the CKA or CKAD certifications. This one is the Linux Foundation certified Kubernetes certifications lah. So those certificates usually there's also like you can look at it both as something that boosts up your profile. When we are generally comparing like different people's profiles on hiring, or if the specific technology is used by the company, right? Like Twitter, for example, if you're applying for them, they use Google Cloud. Then it makes a lot of sense where you have the certificate aiming towards that company.
I see. Okay, thank you. We've got a couple of questions in the comment section now, so we would like to address them one by one. Uh, that's fine. Okay. So can you elaborate again on your last take-home tip, as in, give a sample question and its answer if you don't mind. Is that possible?
Unfortunately, I can't come up with like I was trying to think of an example just now, like even before coming into this, but I'm gonna come up with something intelligent. Okay, maybe I'll try my best and see over here. Like let's say a question like CI/CD pipelines in Google Cloud. They might ask you how you should deploy it, and maybe you can they can give you different available options. Like let's say use the G Cloud CLI to be able to deploy to your Cloud Run application, or use Cloud Build to build that pipeline, or maybe use like what's that, the infrastructure as code solution to deploy. So of course the right answer wouldn't be using the gcloud client, the command line interface, although it is somewhat accurate that you can deploy using the client. But the smarter solution over here would be to use the cloud build application or tool to be able to build the CI/CD pipeline. Yeah, so something like that lah. Where you generally want to choose the more smarter sounding answer, right? Especially in questions that you don't really understand, or you don't really are confident on what answers could be.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next question will be a bit more general question. How did you get started in your career with cloud computing?
I would actually say my career is more application development than cloud computing. It's just more that, remember the earlier part I mentioned, the third reason that cloud computing is part of our everyday life. So I was working in my initial job in Rakuten Wiki. I was working as an application developer, or more accurately, a full stack engineer. And the opportunity just came in that, we needed people to start looking into, doing DevOps related work with Google Cloud. Okay, and we were at the point of time looking at migrating from a different cloud provider to Google Cloud using Kubernetes, as well as using Cloud Build for building our CI/CD pipeline. Okay, so that essentially gave me the opportunity to jump into using cloud computing for our DevOps related work. Yeah, and I use that quite frequently nowadays to complement my application development background and work that I need to accomplish. Yeah. If you don't mind, actually, Akira, I can also scroll to the next couple of questions and help answer them as well.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so the next question by Brandon: do employers care about expired certifications, and should one renew it after it expires? Well, that's a question that I can very much relate to, because as y'all can see, I have one that's going to be expired soon. Uh, okay, here's the thing. If it expires, I think employers would just take it more as you don't have the certification. I mean, frankly speaking, it expires, it's not valid anymore. So it's not really a downside. It's just more so that, like, you had it, you don't have it. Um, to renew it, actually, I have a different suggestion. My suggestion is actually you can renew it, but my suggestion would be if you want to upgrade it instead. So if you all saw in the earlier slide, right, I had the associate cloud engineer first, but I decided to go for the professional certificate, right, because I knew that at the point of time, I already have that basic expertise. Why not just try for a bit higher and go for a better certification to show that I have a deeper understanding in the technology? Yeah. So I hope that answers that question lah, towards whether you should renew it or not. In the end, it's your personal choice. Like it won't work against you if you don't do it. But it definitely helps. Like, if you go for a higher one, and if you have the time to study on weekends and do the exam, you get it. It's an additional thing that you can put on your resume. Okay. Another question by Sarah. I'm a math teacher, and it will help me to change my profession, or how would it enhance me professionally with the same career being a teacher? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, I'm not a teacher, so I think for me, I'm gonna say I find it a little bit hard in answering this part, but I'll try and do to the best of my abilities. Um, I guess for myself, one thing I would say is if you can use, let's say, at least the basic serverless application, to maybe host like certain applications, web applications that you can use to share with your what's that students in a class. Okay, essentially, if you are maybe, let's say, for example, in my case, I was working in National University of Singapore before, right, creating this application called Archipelago, where we allow students to interact with us via this web application, and we actually use the cloud, Google Cloud in this case, to host that application, okay, for one of our courses, and allowing people to interact with the lecturers, right, through the application. Okay, so I would say that I think in enhancing a career, it might be hard to stretch to that degree. But I would say in order to maybe like enhance your experience in the class, teaching your students better, you definitely can build some applications to maybe allowing them to use the application and interacting with them better. Lah. Maybe that's something that I would share. Another question by AA Max. Are there any personal project ideas you would recommend? Wait, sorry, it got let me scroll down again. Okay, my scrolling thing is going all over. Okay, okay. Are there any personal projects you recommend for building, showcasing DevOps related skills, and the steps to accomplish it? First things first, I would say the best way for showcasing that, go do internship. Um, I mean, I'm guessing you guys are taking around like 3 to 4 years of your university courses. So this would give you around 2 to 3 opportunities during the summer break, I believe, that you all can go for this internship. So if you can go for it, especially if it's in the domain that you are looking towards for, like in this case for DevOps, yeah. But outside of that, I guess the first thing I'll say is the basics is usually that I recommend for the people that I mentor, right? Usually I'll ask them to go for creating their own personal portfolio first. Get your own personal site running. Like you could of course use something like GitHub pages to get your own personal site running, but try using the cloud application. Use Cloud Run, for example, with a database. Just get a simpler application there running with your portfolio details, and see if you're able to at least understand the cloud, well enough to get the web application running. I think that's at least a simple way of doing it. The more complicated cases or more complicated use case, I'll actually see, like, look at your life around you. For example, you're in a university right now. You're probably part of some student club. Can you build in something that would benefit your student club, or any of the, maybe your family has a business, maybe you can build something for them as well. For me, I would say that's something that I did sometimes when I was still schooling, and I also did a bit of freelance lah. So maybe that's also something that I could recommend. I mean, if you are adventurous enough, you also want to get that working experience while studying. Doing freelance may also get you the additional related skills, like using Google Cloud, like building applications for other people. Uh, A question by Kalista. I'm a front end developer. I'm planning to convert from front end to cloud engineer. Is it okay that I convert to cloud engineer without backend and DevOps? Definitely is okay. Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I just now I mentioned about I was in Rakuten Wiki and I did that. I was a full stack engineer and then I helped with the DevOps. So one thing that I don't really tell a lot of people about is that as a full stack engineer, I was a full stack engineer in our web team. So mainly I was doing front end work for the longest time for 1 to 1.5 years before I went into backend work, DevOps work. I think the main thing here is to find the right opportunity there. Like if you are working in a company right now as a front end developer, right, look out for the opportunities like projects that perhaps like projects where you're able to participate in to be able to contribute to those. And of course, you should work with your engineering managers or leaders and ask them if they can also give you that opportunity to learn by joining in and be part of those other projects. So that's what I did lah in getting me involved in these projects and getting me that knowledge. Wait, let me scroll down the next one. How do we choose between GCP certification and the other one? So I don't think I can say here because it's cannot say the name because it's being recorded here. But okay, do we have to take both? Uh, I would say this is a decision that you should make for yourself. I mean, the resource that all of us have is time, and it's up to us to see how much we can do within that limited time that we have, and also like other responsibilities that we have as well. And I mean, if you go to LinkedIn today, right, I bet you that you can go and find for any of those people who do a lot of certs, right? I can probably like find one guy with like certificates from all of the three major cloud provider, and this guy has probably like 20 to 30 certifications. So it's doable, but I'm not going to recommend you to do it. I think the main thing in the end is also like based on your resource as well as your career goals. Now, if the company you're working with right now is using more of the other cloud providers technologies, okay lah, then on those grounds I'll actually sincerely like recommend you, yeah, go for the other certifications. But of course, if your company is using Google Cloud, then you should go for that. I think you have to be a bit strategic here lah, because studying for the exam also takes some time. Can take months for you before you will feel ready enough to go for the exam. So rather than trying to spread yourself out too thin, you might want to focus first on the important things to you. In your case, like let's say your current company that you're working for. Yeah. For myself, just to share, I do have a certificate. Sorry, I do have like one of this certificate from this other cloud provider that was mentioned, as well as the few that you see over here by Google Cloud. Okay. Question from Isham. How cloud computing can be applied in healthcare settings like pharmacy? Ah, that is a good question. Uh, Specifically pharmacy. Can I say healthcare? Like pharmacy, I feel like a lot of it has to do with stock taking, and I feel like probably a lot more has to, like, if I'm saying stock taking with web application, probably is a lot of data entry, making sure, like, let's say if you're stock take and ensure whether you have like, the different type of medicine in there. But maybe one thing I would recommend is integrating it with maybe a bit of like IoT systems as well. Like if let's say every single bottle of medicine there's a barcode, you can scan it and then get like the information and then use that upload into Google Cloud through the IoT APIs into maybe some database over there. Then you can sort of be able to do that stock take really easily as well. But if we can go into the area of healthcare, I might actually also go into areas like if you're, let's say, using AI to do like medical diagnosis for people, and then using that diagnosis to link it towards the type of medicine that you should prescribe to people. Now, of course, I'm not saying that that's something that can be done immediately, but maybe not doing the diagnosis part, but doing the prescribing part. Like if let's say the doctor says this person has this condition, and maybe we can immediately already translate to the type of medicine that can be recommended to the users. And as some of you might know, right, there's this thing in the medicine world called generics. Like let's say I think Panadol is a, like, you guys might know Panadol, right? The other name for it is paracetamol, and essentially Panadol is just a brand name. But if you're able to use, let's say, like AI services to catalog, a bunch of this different type of paracetamol, you can actually maybe prescribe the cheaper alternative for people as well. Yeah. So I think that's one way of allowing people to make better decisions through the applications you build. Yeah. Okay. I think one last question from Marcus. What could be the job to apply with this certificate? except cloud engineer. Let me look at the other certificates. I think it really depends on the certificates itself. Like the one digital leader, I would say it's more generic. So I would say right now as an engineering manager, and even as a product manager, project manager, TPMs, it's good for them to get the cloud digital leader certificate so that they can somewhat understand the functions for the other team members who are working in these areas and be able to maybe plot out work in a better way for them as well. But there are also other data related certificates. If you're, let's say, going for a data engineering job, or as an ML engineer, doing ML ops, these are areas that certificates that you can actually also go into, like for example the professional certificate for machine learning engineer. Yeah. So it's not just DevOps, although a lot of it would go into DevOps because it is cloud computing, it is cloud infrastructure after all.